Hi, greetings and welcome to week 2 of the history of rock and roll. We have a few house cleaning items to take care of before I start. And first let me say that the majority of you did an excellent job this first week. You're off to a great start. I really enjoyed your aha moments. You had some fascinating aha moments. I hope that the others of you looked at each other's aha moments. Your conversation discussions were good. And that brings up the first house cleaning things. You must participate in this class to get grades. You must attend the class to be counted as participating and in attendance. There is a rule that you must, by Baker University, that you must sign in at least 2 or 3 times, like probably 3 times would be best, to show that you're actively participating. If you sign in on Sunday, post your papers on Sunday, do all of your things on Sunday, I'm sorry, that does not count as being in attendance. That is not my rule, that is Baker University rule, but I kind of like it and we will go with it. This first week I was a little more lenient on some of these things than I will be in the future. That is your warning, that is the thing. Now that is only for a few of you, actually about 3 or 4. So the whole message is that way. So let's go ahead and look at what the other housekeeping things are. 1, be sure that you read what the assignments are. Send in the correct papers and the assignments. This week, for example, and I will read off notes here so I make sure we're going to do it correctly. We're going to be studying chapters 4 and 5. Now, that is the 1950s style rock and roll and the transition to the 60s. Okay, we'll come back and talk more about that in a minute. Let's come back to the other things. The attendance, you must participate. If you're off to a slow start, don't panic. We have 1,000 points, yet you can still earn in this class. There are a lot of points. Okay, if you're off to a great start, which the majority of you are, keep up that pace. I thoroughly enjoyed reading your papers. Some of you are extremely innovative. Some of you are very much by the book. Both of them worked very well for me. Okay, then let's go ahead and look. Oh, one more thing. If you write your paper and you have a half a page of introduction, not introduction, but the little format where you tell me who you are, who the class is for, what time is. If you have half a page of that, you need to have half a page of material more, because you have to have 2 full pages of material in your papers. Okay, the majority of you are really good writers. I was very impressed and I thoroughly enjoyed reading the papers. Okay, now where are we going this week? Well, get prepared for a surprise. We're going to the 50s and 60s. Now, how are we going to go to 50s and 60s? And what will I expect your papers to be? You can have a blast this week because I'm going to give you some ideas. You can write on the personalities of this week. This week would be the week for your personality papers that some of you sent. Let's go ahead and look and see. We have some great people this week. And here are some side suggestions you could do. For example, we have Little Richard. A story all to himself. There are books written about Little Richard. Jerry Lee Lewis. There are movies about Jerry Lee Lewis, and I would highly recommend that you look at them. Great Balls of Fire. It is one of the most enjoyable movies I've seen, and Dennis Quaid does a great job, okay, at playing Jerry Lee Lewis. Buddy Holly story. There are 2 great versions of the Buddy Holly story out. And when you see who plays Buddy Holly in both of them, your first reaction is going to be, you've got to be kidding me. But I will tell you this, both stars who play in the 2 versions, one was for television, one was for theaters, do a fantastic job on Buddy Holly. Okay, so this is a week you can do personalities. Now, let's go ahead and expand a little bit. If you're going to do the movie reviews on those movies and make that part of your report, that is cool. I can live with that. In fact, I would recommend that you watch Rock Around the Clock, which will be Bill Haley and the Comets. By the way, speaking of names, see if you can figure out why Buddy Holly and his group are called the Crickets. That is a nice story within itself. Okay, now what are we going to discuss on the discussion? You can discuss any of the music of this time. You can discuss the groups. Just take these 2 chapters and find something that kind of gets your interest and discuss it. Now, let's talk about what are we going to do in the 1950s? What are we going to find? Well, I'll tell you what I've done. I have gotten us a tour guide. He's coming in on a flying saucer right now, because flying saucers were big in this time, remember? Here he comes in. Wait, that's not a flying saucer, that's a paper plate, which also were invented in the 1950s. This is our tour guide. His name is Dennis Bozarth in the 1950s. Yes, one time your instructor looked like that. Okay. Now, what was he doing at this time? Well, he and Elvis had a lot in common at this time. You see, Elvis was a great performer. Dennis was a music major. He could play most of the musical instruments in the band, while Elvis could play 3 chords on a guitar, but Elvis was a great performer. Elvis and Dennis got letters from the same organization at this time, because you see, in this day and age, there was a thing called the draft. Elvis passed his physical, but because we were between wars, Elvis went to Germany. And Dennis did not pass his physical due to childhood illnesses that were very serious, according to the government. Okay, for your information, Dennis is still alive, Elvis is not, contrary to what many legends will say. Elvis was making a fortune. Dennis earned $30 a Saturday by giving private music lessons in a parochial school while he was in college. Then he took his first teaching job for $4,900 in South Central Kansas. His first automobile was a '57 Plymouth with fins. You might want to look at that. Okay, go away, Dennis. We're done with you now. And so now that'll give you a hint of what you're going to do this week. Be innovative. Look at the material. Now, one of the problems that some of you had is you only use one source with your papers. You must use more than one source. I want you to get a different perspective of each thing. The author of this textbook, the authors are very good. This is one of the best textbooks that we have ever used in the history of rock and roll. There's another one out that you might want to look at sometime called Rolling Stone History, which is not a history of the Rolling Stones, but it's a history of Rolling Stone magazine, in which they take many of their articles. Those are very good articles. So, with that in mind, it was a fun class. The papers were great to read. Get into the participation discussion. Tell me about the music of that time. Tell me about the people. Tell me what... Talk to your grandparents. Go talk to your grandparents and say, okay, what were you doing at this time? Some of them they may tell you, some may not tell you what they were doing at this time. All right? So, you must get these 2 weeks down really well, because next week we will be going into the Beatles. Do not go into the Beatles this week. This week is the legends of rock and roll, and this is the 1950s and starting into the early 60s, which, see if you can figure out a problem that's going to happen. Well, I will tell you. It has to do with almost a milk toast type taste, in that rock and roll will stop being the legendary things and almost go back into the ballad things. Got that? Okay. So, with that in mind, I will talk to you next week. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. If you have any questions about the messages I sent you, send me an email. Okay? And with that in mind, I will talk to you next week. Thank you.